Members, thank you. For being prompt and for joining this morning BAC meeting, the 22nd of September, and it's now 9:07. So let's declare the meeting open. Pusha, if we can just deal with the agenda confirmation.
Okay, we have 8 reports plus 1 additional from CSDS. That will be item 6 on the index check on the agenda, not the index.
Thank you. On the applications for leave.
None, Chair.
On data, James should still be joining. Members, let's do minutes, 24th of August. Just a reminder for you to please complete the declaration of interest and submit the same to Secretariat. And I see our CME colleagues online. So this meeting is being streamed live on the YouTube channel. As we go page by page, you will just indicate where the colleagues must stop for amendments. Portia, if you can just go through the pages. Your screen disappeared.
Chairperson, I had the index on, so I'm trying to get to the minutes of the 24th.
Also, please remember to send the invite to the CSDS team. Members, the minutes are 204 pages. Is there anything on the minutes that you've identified that requires adjustments and changes?
Nothing from my side, Chair. Nothing from my side, Chair.
If there's nothing specific, colleagues, we can adopt the minutes. I trust that my members have gone through the minutes. I see Portia is also struggling to page through. I have a seconder. This is the minutes of the 8th of September. Any comments on these minutes? Sis T.
Covered, Chair. No comments from my side.
Marusha. Asminki, anything from your side?
I'm covered, Chair.
Marusha. Let's adopt that set. The next one for share was a special meeting. This one, the only amendment that I noted was on, I think 1.2 for sure. I see there was just some words that were missing as and when required there. At the bottom, so at the following rates, we didn't have that in the previous set. I see Portia has updated it on the set, but just for the purposes of the members to just note the table was added as it was agreed with the totals removed. And it was a raised appointment. Can we adopt the set?
Yes, Chair.
T.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks. This is the minutes from the 15th of September. I think let's delay these ones. The There's an item that's the EED item. Just go back to the index. Oh, never mind. It's not in these ones. Okay. Confused the sets members on these minutes. Your comments and inputs.
Nothing from my side, Chair. I'm happy with the minutes.
Nothing from my side, Chair.
Let's adopt the set as well. And then we can go through to the main agenda. Did we get any departments that have joined or chairpersons?
Chairperson, I see Felix Rajuli, sorry, Felix Rajuli and Justice Ratupetsane for item 2.
Okay, let's do item 2.
Chairperson, item 2.1. It just have a few seconds. Apologies, Chairperson. Item 2.1 reads Group Shared Services, item GICT 04-2022/23, tender for the appointment of a panel of service providers to provide the City of Tshwane with the managed information technology security. And as and when required for a period of 36 months period, Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thank you, Justice.
Good morning, Chair. Maybe I must start by firstly declaring that I do not have any interest in this item and that I will abide by the rules as required. Basically, the item tabled is GICT 04 as indicated. It was the bid specification committee approved this back on the 6th of June. The bid was advertised on the 10th of June and it closed on the 15th July 2022, that is. There was no briefing session and the officials are noted there and the BEC. We received 50 bids for this tender and it's 90 days expires on the 15th of October 2022, and the estimated budget is 40 million as noted there. In brief, this is a panel for ICT security services, and the intent from the department was to appoint 3 service providers per category. The bid itself has got 11 categories as noted within the specification. If you go to item 9 of the report, and it's on page 18, you would note that the bid was to be evaluated in 3 stages: administrative compliance, mandatory requirements, and functionality criteria. And admin is the basic documentation that we look at, whether they've completed the documents in full and that. And in terms of the mandatories, they had listed category A to category L, and for each of these mandatories, there were mandatory certification that bidders had to submit to comply with. And of course, if they don't submit any of those, then they would have been disqualified. And then the functionalities table itself is noted on page 20, basically reference letters, economic participation, and then the different skills that are required. The most important thing was 8.2, which required that for each category, mandatory documentation had to be submitted, which is what we focused on during our evaluation. And on page 22, the list of bidders is provided there, 1 to 50. And in terms of, as we indicated, there was no briefing session, so nobody was disqualified for that. All bidders were registered on CSD, as noted. And then we did some pre-compliance as well, just to check some of the basic administrative requirements, and those are noted there. No bidder was disqualified for that, except to note that some were non-compliant, as we were text non-compliant as we checked at the time. And then there on 6.1, we noted 2 bidders that had state employees within them. And as per the regulations, these bids were then disqualified, bidder 2 and bidder 25. And the details of the state employees are provided there. And then on page 8, so on page 25, item 8 there, we noted administrative compliance, particularly MBDs, the critical MBDs that we evaluate, MBD 4 particularly, 8 and 9. And for that, we noted that bidder 1, 4, 7, 9, 12, 14, 15, 18, 20, 24, 31, 32 did not declare other companies that their directors participate in as per MBD 4.3.14. And as a result, actually there's additional ones, 35, 36, and 43 and 44, which were then disqualified due to incomplete declarations. And then we went to stage 2 of the evaluation criteria, where we evaluated each of the bidders in terms of the mandatory requirements. As I indicated, each category, a bidder had to submit certain certificates for them to be able to participate in that category. On page 32, item 13.1, there are 7 bidders which are being disqualified, because they did not comply with the mandatory requirements. And this is bidder 3, bidder 5, bidder 13, bidder 19, bidder 26, bidder 30, and bidder 33. And that leaves us with 25 bidders that qualified for a category or so. And that is in terms of 13.2 on page 32. And it goes into page 33. And all these 25 bidders were then put through the functionality evaluation criteria. And table 14, or item 14 on page 33 notes the outcomes of functionality evaluation. And all the 25 bidders achieved the required minimum 70 points. And will therefore go through to the next stage. The other point, as I indicated earlier on, the intent of this specification or the tender was to appoint 3 service providers per category. However, as you heard earlier on when I read the evaluation criteria, the tender did not have a preference point evaluation stage. That is to say, although bidders had submitted rates as required per the pricing schedule, those rates we could not do much with them because the advertised evaluation criteria did not say we will look at the reference point or price, if I may just use that language loosely. As a result, we are noting on page 35 that although the bid document required bidders to quote for different consultancy over 3 years, the evaluation criteria does not include a stage for price evaluation. Therefore, all bidders that scores the minimum functionality points will be listed for the categories that they qualify for. Thus, it is not possible to recommend only 3 service providers as originally intended, required by the tender. And then we were going further to say that as BEC, we could not use the functionality points to rate bidders per category, as the functionality evaluation criteria was not necessarily defined per category. It was a generic functionality criteria across all the categories. So we only evaluated the bidder once on functionality. As a result, we can use the outcomes of the functionality or functionality points scored to rate them per category. And for that purpose, we have listed the bidders that qualified per category in terms of the table that follows there. But we're providing a summary. I'm going to tell you the page just now. On page 39, where we recommend in that, for example, for category A, we have listed the bidders that qualifies for that category there. And then for B, we have listed them and so on and so on. I don't necessarily want to read them as the report has been circulated. So as a result, BEC is recommending the bidders that qualified for the different categories as bidders that have been found compliant and acceptable for this bid. And that is what we are tabling for BAC to consider. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Justice. Members, the report is tabled. Your comments? Member Mpefu?
Chair. Apologies, Chair. I think I missed, or maybe I got lost when Justice was talking to the recommendation, Chair. So, Chair, the requirement of the bid says we are recommending the 3 highest, the maximum of the 3 highest qualifying suppliers. I think I missed him there. So what are we saying, Justice, based on the scoring that is tabled, and your highest will be 185 and a 95. So those ones will be recommended. Maybe I didn't get that. Sorry.
Thanks, Verusha.
Thanks, Chairperson. I wanted clarity on the reasons in terms of the mandatory disqualification, because the mandatory requirements are quite extensive. You'll see that they need to have certain OEM certifications and other requirements, but it's not indicated what wasn't submitted or where the issue was in terms of those that were disqualified. If we can have clarity on that and the reasons, if it is recorded. And I also wanted to understand, I see that there is a functionality criteria, but with regards to price and BEE, is that not a requirement that needs to be considered when we are awarding a tender, or is it in order that it's just a 3-stage ending at functionality? I wasn't very clear on that. And the issue of the 3 service providers versus the service providers that we were recommending when the presenter was taking us through the report. I just didn't understand the rationale for having more service providers than what they appeared to be indicating was required by the department. Just missed that point, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Osminki.
Thank you, Chair. My only not a comment, but clarity that I would seek from Justice is in relation to the last portion that Verusha spoke about, the 3 service providers that were requested or required by the department vis-a-vis the number of service providers we have currently, Chair. If I can just maybe get clarity, if ever the department is happy with what the committee has done, other than what they have requested in relation to the number of service providers. Thanks.
Thank you. James, are you in? Justice.
Okay, Chair. Thanks to members for the questions. I think I started by indicating that the tender indeed intended to appoint 3 service providers per category. However, we should recall that in terms of the PPPFA regulations, bidders are a tender is specification needs to be very specific in terms of how a tender will be evaluated. So this tender, as it was advertised, it had 3 stages of evaluation, which was administrative compliance, mandatory requirements, and functionality criteria. At the same time, within the tender, there was a pricing schedule where bidders were required to, for example, offer consultancy rates, which will be used over 3 years for the identified skills. However, what we were noting was that due to the fact that preference points criteria was not part of the stages that were advertised, we therefore can't evaluate or use the prices that were submitted by bidders to be for evaluation purposes. Because if we were going to use price for evaluation, we needed to have added a stage for preference point evaluation. So that on its own creates a limitation in that the price that has been submitted will not necessarily be considered for the purposes of a rating as it was intended. Just to deal with the second issue that was raised, in terms of the mandatory requirements, if, for example, you go to 8.2, the mandatory requirements, For category A, for example, a bidder had to submit as part of their documentation OEM certification, CEH, a CISM certificate, or ISO 27001. That is to say, they will have to have some kind of OEM accreditation, a person who's been certified as a hacker, a system manager, or a system manager, and then ISO 2007. So if, for example, they didn't have any of those certificates, they will then be considered non-compliant for that category. And then for B, they will have to have a CISM certification and a CEH. And if they don't have any of those, then they will be regarded non-compliant. If you go into the same report, and I'm just going to tell you where we noted who qualifies for what in terms of the evaluation that we did. I think on item 13, what page is this? Page 31. On page 31, we're showing, for example, bidder 3, it was disqualified, so they did not qualify for any of the categories. 5, they did not qualify for any of the categories. Bidder 6 qualified for category B, D, and F only. 8, and so on. So in this table, we're noting what each of the bidders qualified for in terms of the different categories. And then 13.1, we then isolating the ones that were disqualified. Again, 13.2, the 25 bidders that made it in terms of mandatory, we are then showing for which categories have they qualified for. That is to say, in terms of the mandatories, they've made it for those different categories. When we evaluate functionality, as I indicated, the functionality requirements were generic across all these categories in terms of how the tender was advertised. So you had to have 3 reference letters that shows you did related work in terms of security, IT security. You had to provide 3 professionals, a senior security specialist, I think a project manager, and a junior one with different experiences. So we then evaluated each of these bidders through that, and that is what gives us the preference points that they have scored there. So what we saying, Member Mpefu, is that in the absence of a preference points evaluation criteria, the second option would have been to possibly consider the points scored for functionality to rate the bidders per category. However, because this functionality evaluation was a generic across all the categories, it doesn't help us to, for example, list bidders per category. If, for example, the functionality was functionality evaluation for category A, for category B, for category C, maybe then we would have used the points per category to list the top 3 bidders. But because it was a generic one, we didn't think it would be appropriate to just take the top 3. For example, here you have got so many bidders that scored 100, and those that scored 95, and so on. And as I'm saying, it's generic. It doesn't really help us to achieve that. So what we thought best was to then say for all the 25 bidders that scored 70 points and above, let's list them per the different categories that they qualified for, and recommend those for approval. What would then happen is that each time the department wants a service, they will then issue a code, a spec for coding purposes, and then based on which they will then evaluate and then appoint a service provider to provide the service. So that is how we approached the evaluation of this tender, considering the limitation that we observed in the specification. Chair, I hope that clarifies the questions that were raised as I noted them. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. There's a follow-up from Member Mpefu.
Thanks, Chair, for the sake of progress. I hope you would allow some sort of a dialogue between myself and Justice, because Justice is talking and I'm struggling to understand Justice, Chair. So I guess if I were to ask a question and he can respond, maybe I'll get to his level of understanding in terms of the evaluation of this tender, Chair. Chair, there's a requirement that says, let me just quickly go back to 8.2. Okay, that the bidders are requested to obviously circle the category that they are of their choice, and that selection must be accompanied by appropriate documentation. And should a bidder respond to all 11, then the 11 accreditation certificate must be attached. Simple. So justices say, Chair, because there was one generic evaluation, the functionality, they can't split. I don't understand what he's saying, Chair. So, Chair, if you are bidding for category A, obviously your experience or your reference letters must link to category A. Not unless I don't understand the project, Chair. Maybe category A to whatever category, the 11. If you're to submit one thing, it links to all the categories. My expectation, Chair, would be if you are bidding for 11 categories, then if you want the maximum points of 45, you must submit 3 of each. That's where I need clarity. To say, if I were to submit 3 of any, and I have submitted in terms of mandatory all the relevant certificates, and I just only submit 3 for evaluation purposes in terms of functionality, will I still qualify for all 11, Chair? Or I require 3 if I need 45 for each 11 categories? Chair, I refer the member to the implementation guide, Chair, of the preferential procurement regulations that talks to the fact that we needed a maximum of 7. And should that not be possible, there are ways in which we can get to your maximum 3. And this is not necessary, this does not necessarily have to be stated in your bid document, Chair. So if you can answer the 2 questions, maybe I'll try and follow, Chair, because I am not following.
Okay,
Thank you,
Chair, I
Chair.
don't know through you, maybe I can attempt to just interpret our interpretation. 8.2 member, in our understanding, relates to the mandatory requirements, the mandatory stage of evaluation, stage 2, which required that a bidder indicate of the 11 categories which category they are bidding for. And as I read earlier on, for example, you would have seen that for each category, they require a different type of certificate. Some may repeat through the categories, some of those certificates. That is to say, you then had to say for category A that I'm bidding for, attach the CVs and the relevant certification of the CVs that you are attaching there for that category. And we'll evaluate that per category like that. However, and what we saw across most, if not all, the bidders was that they would have, for the purposes of these categories, separated them like that. And then for functionality purposes, they then just put the 3 references which indicated their experience in IT security business, and then the relevant CVs of the project manager and the security senior security expert and the security expert with the relevant experiences. And then their rates and taxes or lease agreement to indicate where their offices are based. And that is what we looked at. And in as far as the rate in our interpretation, we thought the first point would have been to take the consultancy rates as provided for by the different bidders and do a total of those rates and then apply each on a 90-10. That would have been a simplistic way to do it in line with the pricing schedule that was issued. But then we observed the limitation that the evaluation criteria did not necessarily put the preference point stage as an evaluation criteria. And then we then said, if in the absence of that, could we not use the functionality points to rate the bidders that have made it through the different categories? And in our discussions, which might have been limited, maybe it was that we noted that, look, but on functionality, we generally did a generic evaluation because the reference letters that were issued were not necessarily specific for the categories, for the different categories of the bid. If you for example, read what is on this table in terms of the references, it just said bidders' previous performance and experience in similar work, bidders to provide the references on work successfully completed. These references must specifically state the periods of experience and whether the person supplying the reference were satisfied with the work completed, and then the height and so on. So as the evaluation was more on similar work, not necessarily per category, we thought it might be somehow unfair to just use the preference points that they scored to rate the bidders. And I do agree that I mean, if you, for example, took I mean, if bidders scored the same amount of points, the triple PFA regulation does provide means of how you could. I mean, you could do a lot of stuff like that to resolve the issues. But in the committee's interpretation, we just felt that in the first place, to consider functionality points might be unfair for this purpose. And as I'm saying, we are willing to take counsel, I mean, from BAC, if we are to go back and relook at it, because it was basically, we arrived here based on the interpretation that we jointly had as a committee. I don't think we firm in terms of where we stand now. I mean, if we needed to go back and relook at ways to resolve this situation that is concerning the BAC now, I'm sure we can go back and relook at that. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, through you.
Didn't we have a requirement to get the BSC chair in meetings for clarity? I mean, this is one of those that is just a problem. But proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I can confirm that if you were to use the criteria set in the implementation guide, it will not give you any unfairness in the process. And as the BAC, we're just trying to guard against awards that are not compliant. I hope you understand where we're coming from, Justice, or the BEC. Chair, so based on the fact that the appointment letters Chair submitted that spoke to the general cyber security space. So because the BEC Chair is a special BEC with the technical people or experts. So are they confirming, Justice, you confirming that the use of a generic reference letter for all the categories was an acceptable way forward, having discussed it with the entire committee. So that as we proceed, we get an understanding from the experts that it is the right way of doing things. Justice?
Thanks, ma'am. But through you, Chair, look, we discussed this point. I mean, even yesterday again, as a point of concern, and all three technical experts in the committee agreed that this is the right way forward. And I had hoped that I had asked them to be in this meeting. I just noticed now that they are not here, actually, because I did suspect we might have concerns on this. Maybe I can try and get them and we can pick up on it when they are in the meeting so that they can, as individual members, confirm as well. But they did confirm.
Okay, Chair, as we move forward, we note that fact. But Leroy is in the meeting. Chair, secondly, we note the issue of the paragraph 8.2.1, Chair, which is the consultant cost per category, where Justice said this particular section will not necessarily be used for evaluation purposes, Chair, because they will stop at functionality and the rest will be done at implementation. However, Chair, this poses a risk in the sense that you do have a cost per category that these bidders would have completed, Chair. And we will then get to award based on the highest scoring in terms of functionality, where it stops in terms of evaluation. But these costs, Chair, will then be used at a later stage. And these costs, you might take someone who is at 100 granted in terms of functionality, or that has met the functionality. Because remember, the spec said we want 3. And maybe you would have 3 people at 100. But those 3 people at 100, Chair, their cost per category would have been expensive. And that's where the problem is, Chair, that you then get the city engaging with service providers who are giving us consultant costs per hour that are very high. Because we want them to complete this particular section, which becomes part of the contract, Chair, but we are not using it as an evaluation stage or criteria. And I think at a spec level, I think the city is being misled with such information, whether is it deliberate, Chair, because they are just saying the successful bidder, as and when the service is required, we will engage them based on the pricing rates. So if you engage me at my 100 Rand per rate, and maybe I say to you, no, I can discount to rent, there's someone who was at 50 Rand. And I understand, Chair, this is not the issue for the BEC, but at a spec level, at a department level, I'm struggling. And this is the second tender. The one that we were awarded in 17-18 was exactly like this. And it seems that we're not learning as we move forward in terms of how do we then improve in our specifications as BSc and the department's, Chair. That was just my 2 cents worth of note, Chair. And I am comfortable, Chair, to say if the cyber security space reference letters are used as a generic reference letter, we accept, but note that as the BAC. And Chair, that we cannot not come to resolving who gets to move forward because it's provided for, Chair, in the triple PFA regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Because that was going to be my question. I mean, is this something that is curable? Seeing that the specification seems to be incomplete. If we proceed to include the preference evaluation as a category, would it not be moving away materially from the specification that was issued? I think that's my primary concern. If we can clarify that, then I'm happy for the BEC to go back and take into account the comments of the BAC and get to a point so that we are able to get to the 3 maximum as was required. Because unfortunately, at this point, the evaluation is incomplete, and we cannot appoint. We cannot appoint without value unless we are saying we do the recommendation and do a closed submission to the recommended bidders to submit prices, so that we can get to the final 3. But then the spec didn't go as a 2-stage, so there's so many gaps that we need to close in this particular one. Now, Justice, as the chairperson, we would have come to you to advise us as the supply chain lead. So how do we do it now that you are presenting an item?
Yeah, Chair. Look, I think maybe we are fortunate that all bidders have priced, they've submitted some rates for this bid as required by the spec. The only limitation is that, as I was saying earlier on, we did not necessarily that we will use it for evaluation. And I think the concern that we came up with was, obviously, if we are going to use it to disqualify now, we might be caught wanting, and we thought, let's just present it here and maybe we jointly look at it. But the rates are in the bid documents. All of them have provided as required. So we probably could go back and just, for the different categories, compute those. The only problem and rate them accordingly. And obviously, whoever scores the highest scoring points, then the top 3 will then be considered for the different categories. My concern, of course, would have been a legal one to say, if someone says challenges us and says, but you didn't say this stage will then be used for that, would we not be caught wanting? But as I'm saying, the rates are in the documents, so it's a question of us just going back and computing on that.
All right. Thank you, Member Mpefu.
Chair, the BAC is not asking for the utilization of the cost as included in the bid document. We are just noting the fact that there is cost included, but the spec did not allow it to be used for evaluation, might obviously bring certain risks to the seat. Allowing us to appoint someone at a later stage, we then engage them with high costs. We are in no way saying at this point you must use the costs, but we're just noting the shortcomings maybe from the BSC side. Not unless, Chair, that particular statement is just going to be used, as they said, for analysis and then for benchmarking when the people, because it's not clear whether we're going to send out codes, it's going to be a fixed appointment. Maybe they're going to use it just to analyze roughly how much are the rates in these categories, so that when these guys are quoting at a later stage, because you've got 3 maximum, I'm not sure, then they would use that information as a point of reference to say, but if we've calculated the average is this in these rates, therefore they will benchmark whatever quotations that they're getting. But it's not clear in terms of the spec, but they just said it will be used with the service provider for future engagements. So we just needed to make sure that as we move forward, we note the BSC issues related to the spec, and we are not expecting the BEC to go back and evaluate based on the cost, Chair, because it was not part of the evaluation process. Chair, the BEC must just convince the BAC to say, we did not use functionality based on 1, 2, 3, but we are asking them to apply the regulation correctly. And should you then apply it and you stop at functionality in terms of ranking, and you're saying, I'm not going to throw the slots or based on 1, 2, 3, but we need that information, Chair, as part of the report. so that whenever there are future engagements or issues with this, we would have been seen to have handled this particular process in the best way, or maybe in the way that we think is the best way to handle, and not to have seen as if we've ignored certain things, Chair. Thanks.
All right, Olivia.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everyone. In terms of the rates, I'm just thinking that because we are ignoring them here, and it was mentioned in the spec that we're evaluating only until, even though the rates are given, I'm suggesting that for quotations in future, it should be clear, or maybe the appointment letters, it should be clear that as and when the city requires the services, the service providers will be required to recode. So those codes, the codes in the bid document will be ignored. That's my suggestion.
Your views, Verusha, Asminki?
Yeah, I think from my side, a lot of the issues have been raised already by Member Tembeka. I am a bit concerned about the level of discretion that the BEC have used based on the specification and the evaluation. So I am a bit concerned that if you have to take this matter further and award, you're going to create a situation where you are going to have possibly panels within a panel for when actual work is awarded for specific projects. And that can be a bit concerning, especially because the issue of price hasn't been addressed in this. And I think also when I look at the functionality criteria and how it has been used, I am hearing the rationale, but I'm not sure if the BEC has that level of discretion to interpret it in the manner that they would. But Chair, those are just some of the concerns that I have. But I'll let Minky address any further issues.
Chair?
Member, if you just help us craft that resolution. I mean, the item is obviously referred back, and I think some guidance also on specifically what the regulations are saying will help in directing the response from the BEC. And how we'll then look at the issue going forward.
Chair, Noriki was how.
Hey, this is a complicated one, and my worry is that there's obviously shortcomings in the specification.
Yes,
But
yes.
then at the same time, I think applying the maximum 3 would be unfair, particularly because there's no clear criteria on how to get to the 3. But then there are clear gaps in terms of the evaluation and getting to a point where you've narrowed down your highest scoring bidder. And one would say the fact that that section is not there, it's not compliant with the policy, it's not compliant with the regulations. So at a high level, my understanding is that the BEC must make sure that there's compliance. How they do it, that's where I'm a bit gray, and I'm hoping you can help us get to that point as a comment.
Chair, in terms of a panel, there's nothing wrong if an evaluation is done and there's no pricing, because it's a panel that will then go on a quotation process. So basically, you're creating a database of technical experts. So there is nothing wrong.
But then if you do that, then you can't have a limit, because how do you determine what the limit is?
Yes, that's where we're saying when there's a limit, then you go and see how do you then break a deadlock in terms of scoring. And the BEC is saying they didn't want to do that.
So they must express
Not
themselves.
Unless, yes, they must express themselves, because we are saying as the BAC, they must then obviously clarify as to why the criteria for breaking the deadlock in scoring was not utilized as stated in the implementation guide of the Preferential Procurement Regulation 2017. They must explain that to us. Number two, they must explain the use of a generic reference letters as required as experience in an evaluation criteria. That's all that they need. And Chair, their report is so confusing. I don't know whether
it's even got a different font.
Yeah, their report is so confusing. Chair, I would have expected the BEC to just make things easier for them. Whether they've used the generic letter, maybe it's a word of advice, BEC, you take it or you don't. As you bring it back, you have your category A, you have your list of service providers, you have your category B, not in this, there, the Simpiwe, okay, not on A. But can you just have a proper way of documenting this and just say category A and you list your service providers, ne? Then the nice thing is can you then list them with your scores in terms of functionality, so that should the BAC decide when you bring it back, we're going for functionality, it's just easier, we're able to recommend. Right now, it's confusing for me. Just have it per category and you list all the bidders that qualify in that category from your paragraph 16. And then you have them per category up until your category L. Then it's easier for us to understand what is happening here. You see, when you've got it in your recommendation in paragraph 18, in terms of per category, next to it, where you've done your table that has lots of things in paragraph 15, 16, just do it like in your recommendation there. Have that list per category, but on the side, have your functional score, the functionality scores. Then it's easier for us to understand what is happening here. Just input, Chair, in terms of making sure the report is understandable. Chair, it's just those two issues, Chair, because when we resolve, then we will talk to the BSc issues in the next meeting when they bring the report back, Chair. And okay, let me just leave that one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, are we in agreement? Do we all understand?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Justice?
Chair, I think we have noted the comments made. We will revise that table that's confusing and make it simple, and note next to each bidder the points they scored on functionality, and relook at the PPFA regulation see if applying the deadlock breaking mechanisms would it not create further unfairness, and we would consult, individually from BSC, legal and DH supply chain, and then we can come back with a formulated resolution.
Thank you. So the item is referred back.
Chairperson,
Anyway,
apologies, and Chair, we note that their mandate is expiring next week, Friday, and there must be that requirement that we need this report back on next week's BAC, Chair. Thanks.
thank you.
Sorry, Chairperson.
Who was that?
I don't know who else tried to speak, Chairperson, but can I just say something?
Papa G,
Yes, sir.
we've missed you.
Thank you, sir. The one is that there's a late apology from Mr. James Murphy. Jeremy just sent a letter through now, and I think you saw the photo that the COO forwarded to the team on the WhatsApp group. Secondly, just on behalf of the Office of the City Manager, when the report is redone, that the BAC include the company registration numbers as well next to the bidder's name.
All right, thank you. You must tell him you must apologize before the meeting, not in the meeting. Pusha, our next item.
Chairperson, our next item is from Shared Services. It's GICT 02-2022/23 tender to provide, operate, and maintain the ICT corporate network equipment and expansion of the existing corporate network for a period of 3 years. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thank you, Portia. Who's taking us through?
Chair, is me again, Justice Ratu Petsani.
You've got two reports attached. Which one were we supposed to look at?
The one that says 21, the top one, 21.9.
Why did you give two reports? I got confused.
My apologies, Chair.
As you know now, both are record.
Yeah, no, we'll withdraw the other one. So the one that comes on record is the 21, the one that says whole 21 and 9 2022.
And you're creating extra work for us.
Just
proceed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the item has been introduced. This tender was approved by the BSC on the 28th Feb 2022, advertised on the 10th June 2022. It closed on the 13th July 2022. The officials and the BSC members are noted. We received 12 bids, and the bid expires on the 11th of October, and the budgets have been provided as per that MTRF indication there. Here, the department is basically looking for a service provider to assist with, let's say, network and telecoms equipment needed to extend the current network. It's basically, if I may use the language loosely, generic IT services for the city. I just want to reflect on the evaluation criteria quickly. I'll give you the page just now. I think it's page 9. It had 5 evaluation stages. The first one being admin compliance, pre-qualification, mandatory compliance, functionality, and then preference point system. And what follows there is a description of each of the different stages. We'll deal with that as we explain what we did. And page 13 just lists the 12 bidders. There were no late bids received here. Pre-compliance is noted. Nobody disqualified for CSD. There was no compulsory briefing session. No state employee noted. And there was no restricted bidder as well. On page 16, 4 bidders were disqualified for incomplete declarations in terms of MBD 43.1, and this is bidder 1, bidder 2, bidder 3, bidder 4. And the details are provided there. And then on page 17, in terms of the pre-qualification stage, bidders were required to, in addition to completing the relevant MBD 6.1, indicate who their subcontractor would be for this service, and they were required to have an agreement as part of the submission that came through, and two bidders were flagged for non-compliance in relation to this stage. And it's bidder 6 and bidder 12 who were accordingly disqualified. And then in terms of stage 3, bidders were required to have or to provide, as part of the submission, a valid ICASA license, an OEM letter, professional liability, and public indemnity. And then there was a minimum skills the certification in project management, ITIL Foundation, and so on. So they had to have someone who has those qualifications as noted there. And the remaining bidders were subjected to this stage of the evaluation, and all the bidders complied with the requirements at this stage. So bidder 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 were then took to the next stage of functionality, evaluation, and all the bidders scored the minimum 70 points, and as a result, qualified for the next stage of price evaluation. And on page 24 starts a table of an indication of the summary of their pricing schedule. I must indicate this is a very long pricing schedule of 200 pages. So what we have before us here is basically a summary of the different, if I may say, sub-items in the 200-page pricing schedule. And I'm just going to the bottom of this table because that is where the issue starts. I hope I'm not complicating BAC's day today. Okay. I am on page 39 of the report. The specification went out with a clause that said all bidders must quote on all items, and it said that the bidder should quote tender on all the items listed in the attached item price list, And it said no omissions will be accepted as it will be seriously compromise the evaluation process, as the total quoted price per service provider will then not be equitable to one another. Incomplete quotations not providing all item prices are grounds for summary dismissal, with no recourse from the service provider to contest or later provide outstanding item prices. And based on that clause, we then noted that bidder 5, 8, 9, and 10 did not price for some of the required items on the pricing schedule, and therefore fell short of that requirement, and that they would have created a problem for further comparisons that were then required. As a result, we then remain with 2 bidders, 7 and 11, who were then due for reference point evaluation. Again, comes in another clause in the tender, 6.2, and it says splitting the tender into various parts to award to different service providers and vendors. And I'm just going to read at the bottom of that clause. It says council reserves the right here to allocate any part of the tender to any service provider, and it must not be expected that the tender as a whole will be awarded to one service provider alone. And our interpretation here was that there needed to be some kind of analysis of the tender per parts to see if you were to award a tender as a whole or in parts, what would be the possible outcomes. And our understanding was that a price analysis approach would assist to satisfy that requirement. However, in paragraph 11.12, the BEC is noting that despite the above clause, the pricing schedule itself, although it was issued in full to the bidders, it was not necessarily broken down into the possible parts or that were needed to be used for this analysis. And a quick consultation with the department, they provided these parts. As you can see in clause 6.2, bullet number 2, there was an attempt to mention them there, but they were not necessarily broken down in the pricing schedule. So which creates a bit of some discretionary interpretation, but the department provided it to us just to try and satisfy this clause. And we noted them as A, B, C, D, E. They're basically voice and data switching equipment, which was section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.8 of the pricing schedule, call logging section 2.4 of the pricing schedule as issued, command center equipment section 2.5 of the pricing schedule as issued, hosting solutions section 2.6 of the pricing schedule as issued, CRM solution section 2.7 of the issued pricing schedule. So and based on this submission, we then decided to do some kind of analysis based on these parts. We are noting here that the tender will be awarded as a rate-based tender, and that the figures that follows are basically for a total of rates for the purposes of evaluation. So the first option was that if the tender was to be awarded as a whole, the functionality table that follows on page 41, it means bidder 7 would then be the preferred bidder. However, if we are to follow the parts that we have spoken to up there, the first one being option B1 in terms of that number in there, and voice and data switching equipment as referred in this B option, in this first part, bidder 7 would be the preferred bidder. And then if you were to go to option B2, Call logging, as referred earlier on. Again, bidder 7 would be the preferred bidder. B3, command center equipment. Bidder 11 would then be the preferred bidder. And I want to draw the attention of the BAC here, because our interpretation was that this clause was a cost analysis, was an attempt to say, let's do some kind of price analysis to see if the city couldn't save money if we were to break the parts into the tender into parts. If you look at the price difference for this part of the tender between bidder 11 and bidder 7, because all along bidder 7 has been the preferred bidder in terms of price, and it looked very cheap. But for this section of the work, look at the price difference there, 1.3 million vis-a-vis 19.3 million. But again, remember, this is just a total of rates, and not necessarily a definite sourcing of defined items. And then for hosting solution, here again, bidder 7 is the preferred bidder, and you can note the price difference again there between the two bidders. If you were to go with for option B5 for the CRM solution, bidder 11 is the preferred bidder there, and you can see the price difference, 136,000 vis-a-vis 136,000. So these are the parts that the department would have wanted if they were to consider breaking the tender into parts. These are the parts that they shared with us. So based on this, and we say in the price analysis for possible parts awards does indicate that bidders are expensive for some items while cheaper for some. Thus, it will indeed benefit the city if the tender was awarded in parts, as there is a possibility to save costs on some items at the end of the day. And I think BAC must just remember the limitation that we indicated earlier on. And of course, we then noted the budget there again on page 43. So in terms of the recommendations, we put again the two options to BAC to say we could indeed award the bid as a whole, and we have noted the rates there. And if you go to page 382, we have then started breaking the tender into parts to say if we were to award in parts, these are the rates that would follow. And that's what the report mainly makes the report mainly so long. But in brief, up to here, that's where the evaluation report itself ends. What follows from page 44 is a recommendation with rates, with the detailed rates for the different items. If we were to award a tender as a whole, firstly, and then if we were to award it in parts. So we have just included both these. So I think if I am to draw the attention of BAC for discussion, maybe it's whether the fact that the pricing schedule was not necessarily broken into these parts, as noted under 11.1, could we then not use them? Or could we still use them, considering that there was a clause that says the city reserved the right to allocate any part of the tender to any service provider? I think that is just the issue that we noted for BAC to apply its mind on as well. The report is presented, Chair.
Thanks, Justice. Members, the report is tabled for your comments. Quite a long report. Member Mpliff. See, are you still here?
Yes, Chair, I'm here. I was just struggling to unmute. Chair, there's a clause that Justice spoke to about disqualifying a bidder should they not quote for all the prices. And I just wanted to ask whether the disqualifications listed, wouldn't those just apply to only when you're awarding as a whole? Because they bring in another twist to say they can award per parts or whatever that is. So if you're awarding as a whole, it makes sense for you to price everything. If they bring another suggestion of awarding according to parts, not unless they are confirming that for the parts that they've suggested, those bidders did not quote in all the parts. I hope my question yavakala, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, St. Verusha.
Thanks, Chair. I think Chembeka covered me on that particular issue. The one that I wanted further clarity on was there's an element of subcontracting that was looked at, and bidders were disqualified if they didn't disclose any subcontracting. Based on the type of tender that we're awarding, when the assessments are being made in terms of the functionality and mandatory criteria, are we assessing the subcontractors as well, or is it the main contractor that is being assessed in terms of the requirements of the bid? I just wasn't clear on that, because if you are subcontracting, there is an element that you rely on from the subcontractor, or you won't be entering into that type of agreement. So if I can just have clarity on that, thanks.
Thanks, Verusha. Asminki.
Chair, this is one of the complicated tenders I've ever seen. I'm trying to follow, but then the other thing that it doesn't make me worry is just that I'm not sure if ever maybe I've captured Justice when he was talking about awarding in parts or awarding in whole. What exactly did we indicate in our spec in relation to the awarding? Is it per item as he has indicated? I'm not quite following that very well, Chair, and I hope maybe I can be clarified.
Thanks, Justice.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe let me just start by assisting a member the last question, so that when we go to the other answers, he can follow. What we were saying is that the specification in clause 6.2 didn't open an opportunity or possibility to split the tender into various parts for what purposes. And in bullet 2 of that section, it says, thus a number of related services, such as the call cabinet, cloud hosting, CRM, call dispatching, etc., has been added to the list of services requested under this tender. Council reserves the right here to allocate any part of the tender to any service provider, and it must not be expected that the tender as a whole will be awarded to one service provider alone. And we were saying, we understood this clause to be saying we should do an analysis of the tender being awarded as a whole or in parts. Hence, this whole discussion we started. But then we were saying, despite this clause, we are noting the fact that the actual pricing schedule itself that was issued, the 200-page pricing schedule, was not necessarily broken down in line with these parts as intended. So what you're seeing under 11.1, which is A, voice and data up to E, CRM solution, although these sections are covered in the pricing schedule itself, in terms of those sections indicated there, they were not necessarily clearly subdivided to indicate that they go together like that. And that was the first limitation we were noting. However, we didn't want to stop there. We still said, as a BEC, let's try and do an analysis of what was intended, so that we can show if there were any possible differences or possible cost savings for the city if that approach was to be taken. Hence, we did this exercise of doing a 90-10 for the tender as a whole, and doing a 90-10 for the tender divided into these parts as provided. So that's where we end in that. I think Member Morgan asked the question about the subcontractor. In the main, although the subcontractor is required, it says an agreement must be signed between the two bidders. What we noted was that some bidders, in submitting their resources, did submit resources from some of these subcontractors, but the main assessment, or the assessment in the main, is focused on the main bidder. But yeah, we have seen evidence of resources being jointly submitted for both the main service provider and the subcontractors, and not necessarily, I wouldn't say for all of them, but in evaluating the tender, we did see evidence of some of those shared submissions. But it wasn't necessarily a requirement of the tender that must be the case. And then to come to the question that Member Mpefu asks, Member Mpefu, you're probably correct that the disqualification clause applies if we are awarding the tender as a whole. We had done, before we finalized the report, we had done an analysis of the different parts with all these and you can see what is on the screen there. This is a report before the final one. And we had done a part analysis here, including all the service providers before we disqualified them. And again, we are noting that this bidder here did not price, I mean, 9 there did not price for parts of these services. That in terms of that loss, they would have been disqualified, and therefore bidder 7 would still prevail there. And the same here as well, because they did not price for certain, or in fact, this and that had to be consolidated because it's the same work. And then here for the call logging, for example, with all the others being included, still bidder 7 prevails. And then this was a command center equipment, and this is where bidder 11 prevails even now. And then for the hosting solution, this would have section, this bidder would have prevailed. I'm just not sure if I can't remember off my head now if some of those items that they priced applied to this or not, because we did not go this route when we looked at that loss. We just thought we should just disqualify them. But for CRM solution, again, bidder 11 prevailed. So there's a possible issue maybe here in terms of the hosting solution, which we could quickly verify. So the only possible difference or change would have been on this stage of hosting solution. Otherwise, all the other parts would remain the same. If we were to say, if we are awarding in parts, for the parts that they've priced in full, they must then be accommodated. I don't know if that helps to answer the question that you raised. I hope so. I hope I'm clear. But I was just showing that we did the analysis already before we finalized the report, just to see what the impact would have been. Chairperson, I think I've tried to answer the questions. I hope I've satisfactorily addressed them.
Thank you. Why does ICT write such impossible specifications? Like, I don't know. Just because it's a highly technical area. I'm also concerned about the budget allocated for this particular work. I mean, just from the initial, even though it's only utilized for evaluation purposes, the amounts included in here are quite exorbitant, and I don't know if the department actually have the required budget availability to cover this kind of a requirement. And again, I think in the spec as it was written, it's got some shortcomings that made it difficult for the specification comment for the evaluation committee to effectively evaluate. Rosha?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to understand, is there a component of CAPEX and OPEX that is required for this project? Because it does look like there's also the OPEX component where they're talking about training of other needs. Perhaps that's where the issue of budget may be addressed. I also wanted to understand in terms of the adjustment on certain of the prices, there is in the document that I'm looking at, some of the prices are in red and it says adjusted. How is this done? Is it done by the evaluation committee, or how did they come up with the difference in the evaluation? And was the shared services department at all consulted? Just to confirm, I know Tembeka previously said it's not a requirement to consult departments, but just to confirm that the way that we are allocating the different what do I call them? The different phases or projects within this scope of works. Is it going to be something that's practically allowed, or is there a dependency between the different items? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Justice, before you come, Leroy?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to answer with regards to the Chair's or Mr. Banda's issue on certain of the aspects that might be priced very high. What you must keep in mind is, yes, we have a CapEx budget for this, and then we stay within that CapEx budget for all our projects and so forth. These prices that are listed, as you see on the item list, those are basically the items that we might need or that we have seen over the last 10, 15 years. Those are the equipment that we need and have to replace every now and again. So that is a shopping list of the equipment that we might need during the course of the next 3 years in various stages, and the cost of those items will then will fit that into the current budget that we have for that financial year. So the evaluation prices you see there is not an indication, is not budgetary prices. It refers to what it might cost and what we might need. And say, for instance, we put together like Middestad or Midtown, as we're going to do quite shortly. Then the equipment that we will need to do the Midtown project will be obtained, will be sourced from that list that is approved and the prices that are scheduled against that. And that will then be billed against obviously our CapEx or the department involved and so forth and so on. That is with regards to that. So we cannot expand or spend more money than what's available on the CapEx. And I think the with regards to the pricing on the evaluation, I think that was mostly done by Justice and his personnel. So I presume he will answer to that.
No problem, Justice.
Yes, Chair. I think Roy addressed most of that question. Two things. Firstly, as indicated on 11.1, Member Morgan, fortunately, the department is part of the BEC, so they were able to assist with these parts. They are the ones who provided that breakdown of the parts to say what makes sense better with what. Hence, we have noted it like that there. And the corrections that you are seeing in red, for evaluation purposes, we had to capture the prices ourselves and make sure that the totals that are noted in their document are correct. And we picked up differences. So the numbers in red is what we found to be the correct number because sometimes what they do is they understate the numbers, whether by error or not, and then they seem to be the cheapest, but in fact they are the most expensive at times. So we needed to make sure that we are comparing the bidders on the correct prices. So we captured them, re-verified them, so the numbers in red is what we found to be the correct prices. So I think I have addressed with Leroy's input the raised questions.
Thanks. Further inputs, members? Member Mpefu?
Chairperson?
Any further inputs, clarity?
Chair, my concern with the BSC as they continue to look at the specs, it continues to give us a challenge in terms of evaluation. And I think as part of our resolution, we must talk to our concern for BSC. Thanks.
Thanks, Asminki.
Thanks, Chair. I think Sis Tembeka has just covered me.
Thanks, Varusha.
Thanks, Chair. It was just the issue of whether there's that OPEX component part of it, because I can't find the page now, but at one point I saw that the document was talking about certain things being monthly, and there were different ways that certain of the prices were going to be built or costed. So I don't know if we are just going to, in the recommendations, list the pricing as is, or if there's a need for us to specify which ones are broken down as a cost that is a monthly cost versus a once-off cost. Thanks.
Thanks. Maybe Leroy, you can clarify that particular one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The price list that refers to certain items that are monthly cost. Yes, if you look at the cloud hosting, and if you look at the SLA or the resources and so forth, those resources would then obviously be OPEX. And I mean, that is the prices that are set in the tender and approved by the tender. And we can only pay those rates that are involved there or that are specified there, and those costs are then carried against certain the relevant cost centers and GLs within our department. The capex are then obviously also carried against our capex available for the year on specific projects and so forth. But yes, there are certain items that are OPEX, and that will be carried against certain OPEX cost centers and the GLs with regard to that at the rates that are specified in the tender document or in the price list. I hope I've answered that question, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. That has been answered. I think the last thing from my side is that on some of the pages like 412, there's just some items where there are dashes where it's the rand values. Like, for example, 2.5.025, it's like pure success offer, and then they have like dashes. So when those are there, I assume that means that it's not being awarded, or am I not feeding it correctly?
Through you,
Thanks.
Chair, we noted those. I think it was, and I want to use bidder numbers, not necessarily names. I think it was bidder 11, if I'm correct, that did that. So they would do that, put dashes and put a note and explain why, for example, they would not be pricing for that, or they would not be putting forward a price for that. And they had explained, and their explanations throughout were actually satisfactory. For example, in certain cases, they would have been saying these items are obsolete, and so on and so on. And obviously, they have the advantage of being the current service provider, so they obviously had some level of inside information and all that, and hence the explanations that they had provided throughout. And that's why they were not necessarily disqualified, because when they wouldn't put a number, they will explain why they're not putting a number there for whatever reasons. Thanks, Chair.
So Justice, what are you saying? Are you asking for the BAC to make a decision in terms of awarding as a whole or per part? Maybe I didn't read your report correctly, because it's got those two recommendations or those two options. So your final recommendation is to say we must award per part.
Yeah, based on the evidence of possible cost savings, and that's what BEC arrived at, or with the limitations that we indicated.
Oh, okay.
And we were aware that yeah, BAC may arrive at a different decision, hence we put both options in the recommendations. So for the purposes of not wasting time.
But our recommendation is to award per part.
Yeah, as I read it earlier on, that's what BEC concluded, seeing the evidence of possible cost savings on some items.
Okay. Yeah, because that's very important for the city at this point, that we make sure as we award in a cost-effective manner to try and assist the city with the issues of the finance issues. Members, as recommended, members.
Are you the chair now, Timbeka?
Yes, Deputy Chair, as recommended.
As recommended.
Jay, you can hear Jay is quiet. He's just stepped out for a bathroom break, but he's in the meeting. He's going with his gadget, so he doesn't want to be awkward speaking in the bathroom. So, and I guess it must be clear, BEC, that we're going with this recommendation based on the fact that you've done your analysis and you feel this will be the cost-effective manner, and the fact that this particular allocation or awards per parts was included in the recommendation, in the specification, we do accept as part of or as a way in which we can award. However, we are worried about the fact that the specs as they go out, they are not clear for the bidders to be able to respond in the manner that the city requires. So as part of an additional item on our resolution is to obviously caution the BSC in making sure that they apply their minds and the requirements of the specs are clear to the bidders out there, Chair. Members, let's go to the next item, Portia.
Chairperson, item 1.1, it's from energy and electricity. Item 1.1 reads EED 3921/22 tender for the manufacture, supply, delivery, and offloading of padlock cylinder assemblies, latches, and keys of energy and electricity division of the city of Tshwane. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thank you, Portia. Enos, please introduce yourself, declare, and take us through the item.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Enos Ramonwana, Chairperson of this BAC committee. I declare that I do not have any personal interest in any of the matter that will be serving before the committee. Let me just take a bit of breath, Chairperson, so that I was just moving away from the BEC that they were making noise, so I ran a bit. Okay. Okay, thank you. I declare that I do not have any personal interest in any of the tender that will be serving before this committee. I'm here to present the EED 39/2021/2022 from Energy and Electricity. The tender is for the manufacture, supply, delivery, and offloading of padlocks, cylinder assemblies, latches, and key for the Energy and Electricity Division for City of Tshwane, and this is the material that we keep in stores. It's just a replacement tender of the expired tender. On the following page, bid specification was approved on the 8th of September 2021. Bid advertising date 3rd December 2021. Bid closing date 3rd February 2022. There was no briefing session. And if you move a bit further, you will see that we received the 36 bidders. And the tender is valid. It's expiring on the 30th of October 2022. As I already indicated, this for stock item. The budget is 50 million estimation. From the next page is the specification that will move along down, and then I just want to quickly. If you check page 6, Chairperson, you'll see that evaluation stages, we've got pre-qualification, and the next stage, admin compliance, third stage, mandatory compliance of goods, stage 4, sample evaluation, stage 5, preferential points. And from there, Chairperson, we can move to the following page on page 7. Where we will see that the evaluation summary, the 36 bidders were received on time, and then they were considered for pre-qualification, and they all went through to the admin compliance. From admin compliance, Chairperson, you will see from page 12, from page 12, going down to page 14, From there, we listed all the bidders that was disqualified under the admin compliance. On the far right column, there is reasons for disqualification in terms of the compliance with the MDPD's forms. And then from there, the remaining bidders went to the mandatory from page 15. And then we evaluated all those bidders. And the following bidders was disqualified on due to non-compliance of with the mandatory bidder number 4, 6, 7, 9, 12, 13, 15, 19, 20, 21, 23, 25, 28, 31, 32, and 35. Those bidders were disqualified on the mandatory. And then we're left with 2 bidders, which is bidder number 1 and bidder number 5. And those 2 bidders were subjected to sample evaluation. On page number 18, we populated the report for the sample evaluation for the padlocks. And then they all complied with both section of which is section 1 and section 2. On page 19, we populated the prices of the acceptable bidders for both tenders on 2 sections. And then on the following page, they did the 80-20 for the total amount for evaluation purposes for all those bidders. And then bidder number 5 was the highest point scorer. And then we move to the recommendation, Chairperson, that the bidder number 5, Morang Enterprise, be recommended for the tender of manufacturer, supply, delivery, and offloading of padlocks, cylinder assemblies, latches, and key for the energy and electricity division for City of Tshwane stores. And then for section 1 and for section 2. The tender is presented, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Enos. Unless the report is tabled to your comments. Varusha.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't have any comments at this point.
Osminki.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing from my side, just to get clarity in terms of we are appointing only one service provider for all those individual items.
Madam Pepu.
Chair, I just need confirmation from the BEC. Maybe it is that the Annexure E is the actual sheet or score sheet for the sampling process. Chair, that's all that I needed to confirm. But I think it is, but they just confirm. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Enos.
Chairperson, just a minute. I just want to quickly check that annexes. Go to the annexes she quickly. That she's talking about. But while maybe I'm checking that, Chairperson, just to respond on the first question, yes, the tenders out is is for individual items. These are just padlocks and just differ in color. Normally you will find them on the mini sub and transformers. They normally lock them. You can find one mini sub or one transformer with different types of locks, maybe 2 or 3, but different colors. So on one mini sub. So hence they put them in a section, but then the highest point scorer obviously got the tender. I don't know if I answered the question, Chairperson.
Thanks. How have we protected the city, in the current circumstance where service providers have gone away with keys and where the locks are electronically controlled? They do not want to give the city those combinations. In those recommendations, once these are provided, does everything get given to the city so that you don't have an issue with regards to access to those boxes later on?
On that, for this tender, Chairperson, this one is the manual locking system. It's not like that one electronic. This one, what they do, they bring with the keys, we keep the keys, which means it's a stock item. The electricity department will come in the store, do reservation. We give them the keys with the lock. They go and lock. After they took it, they are responsible for the keys and the lock of that box. It's a manual one. It's not like the other one for electronic. This is just a manual locking system.
Okay. Do you have example pictures of those locks, just out of interest sake? Is it locks that are not easily destructed?
I don't, but in the store, not with me now. Unless if later on I can try to get a picture and later on try to send the example to the BAC.
I'm just wondering if it's a lock that I can easily get from Builders Warehouse. Are they specialized locks?
Yes, they are specialized, like from specific manufacturers, and they normally, as far as I know, they only use them for the almost the same kind of things of equipment by like City of Tshwane, ESCOM, and all those kind of things. Those are the kind of locks that they normally use. You won't find it at Macro or wherever. They normally buy them from those guys that are selling those kind of security locks.
I was buying you time to get to that annexure. Remember, if your hand is up.
Chair, maybe I missed it. Can then the committee presenting this item say it on record that they are adopting a recommendation or a report that was done by another committee? I'm looking at the committee members, Chair, and I see Pam, and Pam is no longer in energy and electricity tenders or backlog. I understand the members are more or less the same, but I'm not sure whether they had to redo or they looked at it and adopted those the work and the recommendation, and they're tabling it as this committee. And I think it's important, if they're doing that, they state that, Chair. I'll just wait for confirmation from the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, regarding that, Chairperson, the tender obviously came to the current committee now, but upon looking at the appointment letter, we realized that the previous committee that I was still chairing, last year we got the appointment in September that expired at the end of September. It was a 12 months appointment. So, and then unfortunately along the way, the same kind of list of tenders was, was supposed to be evaluated by another committee that was appointed in between, was on their list, of which they couldn't do. Then when we were looking at that, we realized the mandate is still valid for that term, because there was no cancellation for the mandate of the 12 months of the previous committee that I was chairing, with Pam and James and the rest on the list. Then it was prudent that we continue, because the only thing was that the tender was not sent to BAC. That's the only thing that happened, of which we're supposed to be sent to BAC. It's three tenders actually. It's not only this one. There's this one and this following tender that I'm going to present, and the other one for the cancellation, of which they failed to submit in time to BAC. So those tenders was already evaluated, but unfortunately, when we're doing our tracking or where they were about, we realized that they were not just sent to BAC, but they were doing the validity and then still doing sending the validity to the service providers, but not submitted to the BAC. Thank you.
So Innocent saying it was the same BEC that did that work.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that BEC names that you see on the report was appointed last year. With the mandate that it was a 12 months mandate till September, end of September, this 2022. Was appointed in September 2021 till September, end of September 2022. And then along the way, obviously, there were a lot of changes of the committee. This tender was part of, they were doing all the EEs. There was no list of tenders. It was just a matter of doing all the EEs tenders. That was the mandate of the committee. Now, along the way, these tenders were listed on the new committee that was appointed in December for 6 months. So based on that, this committee already concluded this one, but there was a new committee, but it was on the list of which the other committee didn't do them because they were already concluded by the other committee, of which it was supposed to be my responsibility to make sure that the tender comes to BAC. So now, on the current committee, this list, because it's a backlog, when we look at it, when I realize that I've got the minutes for this that I signed. Let me go back and check. Then I realized that the issue was that these three tenders was not sent to BAC, but was concluded by the previous that committee in December. And already, not in December, before the other committee took over. Was listed on that other committee. So the mandate of this committee that I was chairing then, of which the mandate was for 12 months for all the EEs, is still valid until month end next week. Because it was 12 months appointment for all the EEs. I don't know if it makes sense, Chairperson.
It makes sense. The only thing you said it was finalized in December, but your minutes
not December.
It's finalized in March.
March, not December, sorry. There was a new committee that was appointed around, it was around March, for about 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. But this tenders was listed on that list. And then it already this committee, the previous committee already concluded the tenders.
Enos. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, can we carry on rates for section 1 and section 2, beta 5? 3 years?
Chair. Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Doesn't say that, just add that in for 3 years. And what Papa G always asks for, in terms of the details of the different companies. Justice just confirmed the taxes. I didn't see it for those two.
Checking Murangi is in order. It's tools away who had issues.
Thank you. Why are you talking about tools away? Because tools away had thing.
No, that's why I'm saying it's not effect. Murangi is in order.
Not bringing things that are not relevant. Push our next item, please.
Chairperson, our next item is from Human Settlement. And it reads, it's item 3. Report to request the Bid Adjudication Committee
Portia, I think you missed the other item for Inos, or did we do that one?
No, I didn't do it. She missed it.
1.2.
Yes.
Yes.
Apologies. EE 26/21/22 tender to appoint a service provider for the reconditioning, remetalling of white metal bearings at Royval Power Station as and when required for a period of 3 years. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Feeling housing. Proceeding us.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. The tender USD 26/2021/22 Utility Service Department tender for to appoint a service provider for the reconditioning, remetalling of white metal bearing at Royval Power Station as and when required for a period of 3 years. The next sheet specification was approved on the 23rd of April 2021, bid advertising date 30th July 2021, bid closing date 7 September 2021, and then the tender has been extended until the 14th of December 2022. We received on this tender about 6 bid documents. Then the next sheet, Chairperson, is the specification. And then if you check on the next page, you will see they highlighted there in red, where it indicated only one tender will be appointed for this work. Somebody is required to collect, recondition, and deliver the bearing journal back to the site. And then there's a project scope going down. And then if you check on page 8, you will see the stages of, on item number 4, stages of evaluation. Stage 1, admin compliance. Stage 2, mandatory. Stage 3 is preferential points. And then you'll move to page 12, where we listed all the bids that bidded for this tender with various prices on them. And then on item number 2, it was the just normal pre-compliance. Item number 3, admin, of which they all complied. They went to the mandatory stage on item number 4. All of them, and you can see on item number 5 that the following bidders was disqualified, of which is bidder number 2, bidder number 3, bidder number 4, bidder number 6. And then we're left with 2 bidders, of which is bidder number 1 and bidder number 5. On item number 8, we put under the price of acceptable bidders, we populated all the prices for all the tenders on the far right columns for the whole BOQ. And then if you move to page number 17, You see schedule of particulars and prices of acceptable bidders, where we used all the totals, the tenders 80-20, and the bidder number 5 is the highest price scorer there on the tender. And then move to the recommendations. That the following service bidder number 5, Vuno Consulting, be recommended for the tender for appoint the service provider for the reconditioning, remodeling of white metal bearing at rival power station is one required for a 3 years period. We recommend that for those items indicated below, and then we indicated the total amount at the end. Thank you, Chairperson. The tender is presented.
Thank you, Enos. Members, your inputs. Osminki.
Chair, I'm covered. Rival.
Verusha.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have any comments.
Ostembek. As an in-committee
Chair,
item.
Yeah, Chair, I just for future Chair to just get a copy of these validity extensions, Chair, so that we just don't take the 12th of December 2022, but it's going forward, Chair. Otherwise, I'm covered with the report.
Thank you. Let's adopt the recommendations of the BEC. Push our next item on a rate basis. Just remove totals, etc., etc.
Chairperson, item 3, human settlements. Report to request the Better Adjudication Committee to recommend for approval for extension of time for Juxtapose Pty Ltd to complete approval of architectural drawings and closure of contract at Sourceville Hostel for a period of 3 months. Chairperson, the item is tabled. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I just do it a bit different today and ask Annalene to just comment on the extension?
Morning, Chair. Can I please just declare I'm Annalene Cronje from EPMU. I declare that I do not have any interest in the items to serve today, and I will abide by the rules of the committee. Chair, for the first report from Human Settlement for Sourceville, we did render our comments, and it's part of the report that is on the link. So if I can just quickly go through those comments from EPMU. We do confirm that there's 3 million available for the current financial year on the Sourceville project. And we also take into account the dates that is mentioned in the report for the plans that needs to be approved. EPMU takes note the building plans were submitted on the 15th of August to building control. So in essence, we do recommend that the 3-month approval be granted to take this project then until the 30th of December, and just take note that there's no additional cost to this extension. So we are in support of this recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. This will be another extension of time over and above the one that was done in June. Who's here from the department? There's no one from the department, so let's defer the item.
So just go on and introduce this witness and say she's doing it. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Witness, you've got your hand up.
Good morning, members. Chairperson, I am from Human Settlements. Name is Witness Masombuga. I'm just waiting for the divisional head Human Settlements provision to join the meeting. Then can I kindly request that we move the item further to allow for her to join the meeting, please?
Let's do item 4.
Chairperson, item 4 is from Economic Development and Spatial Planning. Tender to appoint a service provider for the rendering of a preventative maintenance program and emergency services repairs of the cold room complexes at the Tshwane Market on an as and when required basis for a period of 3 years. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thanks. Who's here from the department?
Morning, Chair. I'm here from the department. My name is Moses Leswalo. I hereby declare that I don't have any personal interest on the item that is going to be served today, and then I'll abide by the rules and regulations of supply chain management.
Moses, do you have delegations?
Yes,
shared with?
Chairperson, I got a delegation from my group head. It has been sent to the Secretariat.
Proceed.
Actually, it's the cancellation tender, ED 14 2020-2021, tender to appoint a service provider for the rendering of preventative maintenance program and emergency services repairs at the cold room complexes at the Tshwane Market. So the service provider has been appointed in 2022 on the 27th of January. And then on receival of the appointment letter by the department, the service provider was invited to come on site to do the site establishment while we are waiting for the service level agreement. On their arrival on the site, they were so surprised to see what they are going to do to perform or to maintain on that complex, because according to them, they were thinking that it's just an ordinary refrigerations, like the household refrigerations and the small refrigerations, not knowing that we are dealing with the ammonia plant, the industrial cold storage. And then we had a meeting with them, and then they proposed that they will subcontract that to another service provider, which we didn't agree with them because it was not part of the evaluation that if they failed, they can consult with other service provider. So after our meeting with them and then taking them through the site and then also confirming with their accreditation body, which is SAQCC, South African Qualification Certification Committee guests that are monitoring all the ammonia operated cold rooms within the country. And then we receive a confirmation from that accreditation body that that company is not accredited to operate on ammonia plant, on the industrial ammonia plant cold rooms. So they also advise us not to let them in because that ammonia gas is too dangerous not to go into the plant itself. So we also talked to the service provider, and then the service provider, they understood the challenges that they're going to face, because according to the bid specification on the mandatory, it is clear that we need professionals that can deal with ammonia operated plant. But to our surprise, I don't know how did they go through, because it also specified that they must have that category to work on ammonia plant. And then during the discussions, the service provider on the 20th April 2022, they sent us a withdrawal letter that they are withdrawing from the tender. So that's why today, Chairperson, we are here requesting or recommending to BAC to officially cancel this tender, because now we cannot do anything because the service provider is still on the system. When we get the quotation and then this service provider, this company blocks us to continue with the minor maintenance of the plant. So the Division Fresh Produce Market is hereby request the BAC to officially cancel this tender in order for us to start the process afresh. We also checked the report of the BEC, if maybe there is no other, the highest scoring tender that can be appointed, and then we found that it's only this company that went through the evaluation stage. Other companies, they didn't make it. So we request that this tender be cancelled so that we can have a way forward in terms of the maintenance of our plant. Thank you, Chairperson.
Moses, your report is very difficult to read. Eh?
Yes, sir.
Very difficult to read. And I was looking also for your attachments on the previous one, and I would have preferred that you attach the official BAC resolution as evidence here in terms of the service provider that was recommended, so that the committee is also able to interrogate and identify exactly what happened in this case, where a service provider that should not have made it past the mandatory stage eventually made it to be appointed without meeting the minimum requirements, as was indicated on the tender itself. So where I'm standing now, your submission is incomplete, and I don't know if maybe members were managed to see something else that I might have missed. Because in the cancellation, we would still need to refer this particular item to pick up exactly where and what went wrong, so that we don't encounter similar issues going forward. Members, your inputs, your view. Osminki.
Chair, I'm covered.
Thanks, Verusha.
Thanks, Chair. Nothing further from my side.
Chair, the report is not complete, not unless I read the wrong report, doesn't have SM comments or legal comments, but I see the attachments and stuff, but they must just bring a proper report. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Justice, can you help the department to just craft a proper report with all the necessary comments and annexures? And maybe justice in the SCM comments, if SCM can interrogate the evaluation and identify if there was a shortcoming in the evaluation of this particular tender that allowed us to appoint a bidder that is non-compliant.
Noted, Chair.
Thanks. So if you can just refer it back, and if you can, please do come back to the next BAC, because I do pick up that this is a critical service that is required by the department, and hoping that you've got or you've already started with the specifications process so it can go through the different committees for urgent appointment. It shouldn't be a big appointment, so I mean, the BSC can approve that it get advertised for 14 days. So I wouldn't want you to wait for the resolution before you start the process.
Noted, Chair.
Thanks. So colleagues, the report is referred back to be further enhanced with comments, and for SCM to just deal with the process, the evaluation process that was followed. Thank you. Push our next item.
Chairperson, the next item is from Communication, Marketing and Events. It's item 5.1. It reads CME 01-2021/22, appointment of a service provider to promote the revenue collection Swania Dima campaign in the city 1 October 2022. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thank you. Who's here from CME?
Good morning, Chairperson. This is Terry Kumalo from CME. I'll be presenting the report.
You have delegations.
Yes, I have. Jabu has forwarded to Gaston and Portia. Thank you.
You please do proceed after your declaration.
Thank you. I declare that I don't have an interest on the report that is before the committee. Yeah, thank you.
You may proceed.
Okay. Chairperson, this is a follow-up brief from the Amnesty Program that the city announced on the 31st of July this year, encouraging the residents and businesses to come forward when they are connected illegal to water and electricity network, to come forward and apply for the amnesty. So the Amnesty Program has been running since the beginning of August it will end on the 30th of September. As we speak, it's still running. After the closing date, which will be the 30th of September, CME felt the need or the importance to create awareness on the campaign and the actions the city will be implementing, as well as thanking those residents that came forward to apply for amnesty. So this campaign that we are presenting, it will start from the 1st of October. It will run just for 30 days, where then we'll be informing the residents on what is going to happen after the closing date. So we did the brief, which we listed all the platforms that we'll be using in communicating the message. We followed the SCM process using the CME 01 panel category B. 11 quotations, we evaluated the report. 11 quotations were received, and we did the recommendation on the cheapest quotation. Yeah, I will end there. The table is presented, Chairperson. Thank you.
The report is tabled.
Yes, Chair, the table is presented.
I said the report is presented.
Thank you, Terry. Some of us had the table is presented, so maybe there's something wrong with our ears. Members, your comments? Ostenbeck.
Chair, I'm fine, Chair.
Thank you, Minky.
Chair, no comments. The table for me looks better.
Verusha.
Chair, I'm fine. I don't have comments.
Thank you. So we adopt the recommendations and appoint bidder number 10 for a total amount of 2.1 million for that promotion. So I think the only thing is this now just in general Tshwane Dima inclusive of the amnesty, because the current appointment is not specific to the amnesty and it just talks about the Tshwane Dima campaign. So will that be covered under that
Yes.
umbrella appointment? Okay.
Yes, Chairperson. Remember, the amnesty is under revenue collection Tshwane Dima.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a period linked to this, you mentioned 30 days.
It's a month, yes. We, as the campaign, the amnesty campaign ends on the 30th of September. So we wanted to immediately start this follow up on the 1st of October, if all goes well. Thank you.
Chair, just wanted to confirm, I didn't say it as part of the annexure, the CSD compliance. Justice, thanks.
Thank you, Justice.
Libro is non-compliant. They would require 7 days.
So let's allow them 7 days. If they get compliant within, we'll process the appointment. Thank you.
Chair.
Yes, member.
Chairperson of the BAC. There, I don't understand. This report was done on the 6th. And I'm sure on the 6th, they did check compliance. And if it was the 6th, and then they would have been given their 7 days. And now we should be moving on to the next if they were not. Can you help us, Justice? Your tax compliance test, oh, they were compliant on the 6th. Justice?
The bidder went non-compliant on the 18th of September, which is after evaluation.
But on the 6th, you checked, they were compliant.
They were compliant, yes.
That was the last stage of evaluation.
Yeah.
And then the report was then not tabled the next week, which was the 15th.
Yeah, it was delayed.
See, these are the things that are creating issues for us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Pusha, our next item.
Chairperson, our next item is from Community and Social Development Services Department. It reads upgrading of Refugee Stadium. Request approval for the extension of time, Chairperson. The item is tabled.
Good morning, Chairperson, members of the BAC. My name is Thabo Mokebe, and I think I would like to declare that I don't have any interest on the item that will be considered by the BAC. And with me, I've got my colleagues, Felix and Peter, and I think if they can be allowed to introduce themselves and declare.
Thank you, Chairperson, members of the committee, AGH. My name is Felix Rajuli, and I would want to declare that I have no interest in the matter before the committee. Thank you.
Good day, Chairperson and members of the committee and colleagues. My name is Peter Maton, and I declare that I have no interest in the item to be discussed and that I would abide by the rules of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm not sure, Chairperson, if we should proceed with the item.
You can proceed, Rupert.
Okay, no, thanks, Chairperson. And once again, thanks for the opportunity, Chairperson. Chairperson, you would note that this is a further report from the report that served at the BAC of the 15th of September. In that BAC, if you recall, there were 14 resolutions that the BAC took that we were expected to basically enhance or include in the report. And this report, Chairperson, basically captures all those aspects that were raised on this report in terms of the request for approval for the extension of time. And Chairperson, I think you will see from page 10, we initially did not want to basically amend the report as it was, and we just actually included the additional information as per the BAC resolutions. And that information, Chairperson, is included from page 10 of the report. And I would like to request our DH Felix to go through those BAC resolutions and the information provided in that regard, which also includes the attachments, Chairperson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, AGH. Members of the committee, as indicated, the report is serving for the second time. The first time was on the 15th of September last week, and with certain recommendations from the committee, we had to do then a further report, and those recommendations are captured on page 11 of the report. And the further report attempts to provide the required information. Yes, and if you go to page 12, then one of the issues, or the first issue captured, was for us to attach the full comments from EPMU. Those comments are attached in the original report on page 7. So with the previous report, the comments only went up to page 6, but the additional or the full component of the comments was captured on page 7, which was not for some reason included. Yes, and I think some of the issues that EPMU are raising here are actually captured in the further report. The second issue was the issue of the dates, the dates that relate to the commencement and the ending of the project, and the corrected dates are included on the second page of the original report. I think in there we just included the months, but not the specific days. But these are included as we speak now in the report on page 2. And when you go further, it's indicated that the department is required. Yes, sir.
Let me interrupt you a little bit.
Yes,
just be a bit more specific. Now, remember, we just got this report this morning. So even when you referred to specific questions that we requested, if you can just indicate. So if you talk about dates, just indicate what those dates are.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. if you look at the original report on page 2, previously, that table talks about the milestones, planned dates, and the status of the project in terms of the milestones. And on the first column there, we're speaking about the appointment of the contractor for 36 months. And the date there is actually the 27th of September 2018. The 27th was not included in the original report. And so it goes with the appointment of consultants, the establishment of site, the construction period, the practical completion at that stage with the extension of the approval. It was originally the 13th of September 2022. With the reasons contained in the report, we are then requesting for extension of the completion date, which is now projected to be the 7th of March 2023. And yeah, I think that is the important information there. But towards the end, then we are indicating the progress to date, which is estimated to just under 60%. Yes, and going back to page 12, Chairperson, for the department to clearly indicate whether the report has got any financial implications. And in there, we are going to detail in terms of this specific claim, which then indicates that because of the financial situation of the city from around November, October period, the contractor could not be paid from November 2021, and the payment was only made in March 2022. And obviously that has its consequences, wherein then the contractor was unable to purchase material and also to pay the subcontractors and workers on site. Yes, and the contractor then opted to use the clauses in her favor in terms of the JBCC to request for the extension of time, and that amounts to 67 working days and another 12 working days for a similar incident in terms of payment 16 and 17 of her claims. Yes, and in terms of that, there will be no additional financial implications, Chairperson. And the other request and motivation for the extension of time, which will also be without costs, is the issue of the weather. With the bad weather that was experienced early in the year in April, the progress on site was negatively affected. And similarly, then the contractor invoked the provisions of the JBCC to request for extension of time, which was approved by the project manager. And yeah, and that then Chairperson gives us an additional 19 working days without costs based on the weather. And that leads then us to the recommended extended completion period from for the 7th of March 2023. And the adjudication of these claims is included or are included as Annexure A and B of this report. Yes, further to that, Chairperson, the department was requested to explain exactly what would happen should the main contractor not be able to do her work, execute the work in terms of the contract from the contract management point of view. And we have listed there the main reasons for the main contractor not performing, with the key ones being the delays in the payments as indicated previously, but also some issues around local community disturbances and the, yes, sir?
Sorry, you're dealing with item 4.
Yes.
In your report, that part is empty. So I don't know which part you are reading under that particular paragraph. There's nothing there, unless I'm looking at a different report.
I'm not sure, Chair, which report you are looking at, but the report
Maybe
that
just
we...
flight what you're looking at.
Peter, can you assist me to flight or AGH?
I'll do that.
Please,
I'm actually on
your
page
voice.
13 of the further report.
Victor, your hand is still up.
Yeah, that's the page we are referring to, Chairperson.
Yeah, on the report I'm looking at, that section is not there. And I picked this report from the email that we received from Amo at 8:56 this morning.
Yeah.
Yes, Chairperson. So if I may, there was an email from Peter Maton saying that this is the amended or the correct report. So I wasn't sure whether it's the same report that Tabo sent.
But now we must deal with this. Group head, when you spoke to me this morning, you said this report was sent on Monday. So which report did you send on Monday?
Okay. No, thanks, Chairperson.
I gave my team a tongue lashing, and I might have to apologize.
No, Chairperson, we submitted the report on Monday. However, as I indicated in our discussion, on the same day, in the afternoon, we received the BAC resolutions. And then noting those resolutions, we realized that there was other additional information required, which was not captured on the initial report. So that initial report then had to be amended. I think even yesterday, I asked the team and I said, please make sure that whatever the information that we've submitted is basically according to the expectation, even the format of the report. So the team yesterday communicated, I think, with Mapula. And yes, and then there were, Mapula advised that no, there were certain other changes that they had to make on the report, which they did. And hence the report was to say, look, replace what was submitted before the BAC resolutions were received, because we were scared. We wanted the report to be on the agenda. Therefore, hence there is this, what you call a bit of confusion, because subsequently, when Peter, after he spoke to Mapule, then Peter amended this, and unfortunately the report that Peter has is totally different, is a bit different from the one that I had, on the basis that there was inclusion of additional information as per the discussion with Mapula.
Thanks for the clarity, Portia. I apologize.
Okay, and I would also apologize on their behalf, Chair, if we've created any unnecessary confusion. Thanks.
Right, thanks. Do proceed, Felix.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I think now we are on the same page.
Apologies. Which document are we looking at now? Because I am now very confused. Are we going to look at the document on the link, or email today, or email on Monday? Can you please just guide me on which version I'm looking at?
Okay, I was using the email copy, so the Secretariat will confirm if the link copy is the final copy.
Ms. Morgan, can you just give me 30 seconds to load it on the agenda, please? The one Peter Morton sent now. Noted, ma'am.
Can I continue, Chair?
Proceed.
Thank you. Chair, we then put on record the measures that are put in place to ensure that the project is back on track. And we have thus far issued 3 notices of non-performance. And we have requested revised programs of work. And we are saying that the project will also be back on track in accordance if payments could be made on time from the side of the city to avoid the repetition of what happened between November last year and March this year. And we have also came to BAC to present a request for a session, and a session agreement was approved, was entered into, and the sessionary is progressing very well. And this is the measure that allowed us to push the project up to 60% to date. Yes, and we are also requested by BAC to give plans to say how are we going to enforce project management, contract management for the remainder of the project. And if you can see on Annex C of the report, we have a contract or terms that we've put for the contractor, and we signed on the side of the city and requested the contractor also to attach their signature, which they have done, and we have then subsequently included that as a part of the report to answer this question, to say what is it that we are going to do going forward. But if you look at the report on page 13 towards the end, we are saying that we have entered into a formal agreement in terms of the JBCC, and if the contractor does not complete the project within the next scheduled time, then the city then has the right to cede the work to push the project to completion through other service providers. And that's contained in the agreement that was signed yesterday by the contractor. Yes, and in terms of how we then going to monitor the project, we have a table there that we have put in place, but in effect, it's just talking to the agreement that we signed recently with the contractor. And we are also saying that if for us to be able to mitigate the risk in terms of capacity, we are ceding certain portions. We would then cede certain portions of the project to approach the threshold of 40% to the sessionary, so that work can be done to that level. Yes, and we'll obviously then monitor the project closely going forward, Chairperson. And the next request in terms of the resolutions of the BAC at the last meeting, we were then asked to give an estimation in terms of the work or the amount that is required for the work to be completed, which is then tabled in the table below. Yes, the allocated budget is 32 million, and in terms of our projections, then the project cost will come just below that at 31.9 million. We're also asked to demonstrate how the sessionary is implementing the contract to push the work going forward. And in terms of that, we are saying that progress on site has been about 5% per month, and we will then push that to about 7% per month to be able to cover the remaining duration of 7 months. The other determination we had to do for the BAC was then to indicate whether there is sufficient budget for the remainder of the contract. The breakdown was done there in terms of what is left for the contractor and as well as the project team. And yeah, the summary there indicates that funds that are required for the contract until completion is about 25.8 million. Yes, we were then requested to demonstrate to say why is termination not appropriate at this stage of the project, and throughout we have demonstrated that we are at 60% of the project and about 40% work is outstanding in terms of the contract. But then if we were to look at the termination, there are a number of consequences, and part of it would be to terminate, which has the implication both financial and legal. And we thought that it would be prudent on the part of the city to continue rather than to consider the termination, given the consequences as outlined. Yes. We were then requested to clearly outline what cost less progress in the project. And as we had indicated, the main problem of the contractor is the cash flow issues. And it has also been evident, given progress in the project, that as soon as the contractor is paid, they continue for a few weeks, and at some point the money is exhausted and they have to wait for the next payment for them to be able to continue procure material and also be able to pay subcontractors. The other issue I think I have alluded to in terms of the percentage of progress, as well as the remaining of the 40% within the 7 month, and the penalty clause. As we said, we're going to stick to the book in terms of monitoring the process, the project going forward. And if practical completion is not achieved by the 7th, then we would then invoke the penalty clauses as per JBCC. The comments from supply chain indicated that if the extension of time is requested without costs, then Section 116 is not applicable. Rather, we use Circular 62, which deals with the extension of time without costs, and that's exactly what we've done and demonstrated in the further report. Yes, the other part in terms of the site inspection that was done by EPMU on the 15th, the Annexure D of the report out of that site inspection is attached. Yes, and we have done, I think, all the requirements of BAC as per the resolution of the last meeting to date, and we are then recommending for the committee to consider the amendment of the practical completion to the 7th of March 2023 for additional 112 working days as set out in the report. And yes, we are then requesting for the extension of contract validity period in terms of the e-procurement contract HHS 01 2015-2016 CSD1 for the upgrading of Refuller Stadium up until the 30th of June 2023. The report is tabled, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. And I think we must thank the department for the comprehensive report back. Members, your comments? Minky.
Thank you, Chair. I think the department has covered all the discussions that we had the previous meeting. Suffice just to ask as in whether the said, if I had the Ndatera Julie correctly, does it mean that the session agreement has been signed already by the department as well as that the guy who's taking over?
Thank you, Ostenbecker.
Chair, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you, Verusha.
Chair, I just wanted clarity on the revised time schedule that the developer is providing. Is that something that has been agreed to already, or is there still a revision that needs to be submitted and approved? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Group Head Felix. You can comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the contractor, the session has been signed and the sessionary is on site. And the reason we have so much progress on the project is precisely for the efforts of the sessionary, which is Darat's projects. Thank you. And the after the signing of the agreement as per Annexure C, we are scheduling a meeting next week with the contractor to look at the revised program, and so that then there's agreements in terms of the timelines or the milestones up until the conclusion of the project. And as we said, any breach of this agreement then will invoke other measures for us to be able to complete the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I propose that we adopt the requested extension of time without additional costs. With 2 additional recommendations. Recommendation 3, indicating that no further extensions of time. Well, I guess we can't really do that, but under the current circumstances, should the practical completion date not be achieved, that the penalty regime be applied from the 7th of March. If practical completion is not achieved by that date, and that the contractor be listed with National Treasury as a, what do they call them, a slow performer? Or I know there's a category there for contractors that are slow for poor performance. Do I have the right description, Justice?
I'm not sure I followed you fully.
I want us to list them as a slow performer, but I know there's a specific term they use in the National Treasury database. I just can't remember what it's called.
I think let's just say list them for poor performance. We'll find the right way for output. Yeah.
Members as amended.
Yes, Chair, it's amended.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Share our next item.
Chairperson, our next item is from Human Settlements Department, item 3.1. It reads report to request the Bid Adjudication Committee, BAC, to recommend for approval for extension of time for Juxtapose Pty Ltd to complete approval for architectural drawings and closure of contract at Salisbury Hostel for a period of 3 months. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thank you. Who's representing the department?
Good morning, Chairperson and members of the BAC. My name is Lebogang Kadimeng, and I have a delegation letter that has been sent to the Secretariat, and I am representing the group head. I want to declare that I have no interest whatsoever in the item to be tabled or the items to be tabled before the BAC today. I am with the project manager, Witness Masombuga, who will be taking the committee through the report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Witness Masombuga. I hereby declare that I don't have any interest on the matter to be discussed today, and I will abide by the rules of the committee. So that the item has been presented. The purpose of the report is to request the Bid Adjudication Committee to recommend for approval of extension of time for Juxtapose Pty Ltd to conclude on contractual agreements, achieve architectural drawings approval from building control, and close the contract at Salisbury Hostel for a period of 3 months. Then in terms of this contract, Juxtapose was initially appointed on the 17th of January, 2022, and the contract completion date as per the project kickoff meeting was recorded as 17 August 2021. Then on the 22nd of July 2021, we went to BAC to request for an approval of extension of time because we had challenges within the project, and it was approved up until 30 June 2022. Then on 30 June 2022, we went back to BAC to request a further extension of time number 2 to be to extend the contract up to 30 September 2022. And at the meeting held on the 30th of June 2022, the Bid Adjudication Committee resolved that approval be granted for the extension of time request for Juxtapose to complete designs and project supervision for the completion of 20 units at Salisbury. The experienced delays resulted in a loss of time for duration of 3 months, and that the project completion date will be revised to 30 September 2022 to enable the approval of building plans and to close the contract of Juxtapose as per the South African Council of Architectural Professions Guidelines 2015, and that the extension of time will not have any financial cost to the city. Then after the approval was granted, then the building plans were submitted at the building control on the 15th of August 2022, and we're informed by the building control to say the estimated time frame for approval of building plans is going to take 4 to 6 weeks, which the latest date for us to receive an approval was going to be on the 27th of September 2022. And again, because like in terms of the resolution of 30 June, where we requested that we need to close the contract of Juxtapose due to the building that the consultant is working on has been invaded, then we have started the process for the closure of the contract, and Juxtapose submitted the proposal for the closure on the 2nd of September 2022, and we are still in negotiations for the final claim that needs to be paid to close the contract. And the final claim is dependent on the approval of the building plans so that we settle everything within the contract. Then again, in order to allow for a fair negotiation and closure of the contract, we request 3 months so that the contract can be extended to 30 December 2022, so that all the processes can be followed and this contract can be closed officially. Then hence we are recommending to the Bid Adjudication that approval be granted for the extension of time requested by Juxtapost Pty Ltd to conclude on contractual agreement, achieve architectural drawings approval from building control, and close the contract at Sosville Hostel for a period of 3 months. And number 2, that the project contract date for Juxtapost Pty be extended until 30 December 2022. Number 3, that the extension of time will not have any cost implications to the city because we are concluding the contract within the appointed contract value. Thank you, members. The item is presented.
Thank you, members. The report is tabled. If you can also take into account the comments that were raised by EPMU earlier on in the meeting. Your comments, please, Varusha.
Thanks, Chair. From my side, I'm a bit concerned about the eviction process that is dependent on the finalization of this project. And given the timeframes, how far is Group Legal Services with progress on this? So remember, this is the 3rd extension as I'm reading it from the report. Are these timeframes going to be agreed to? Because there is a little bit of a dependency issue. I do support the fact that at least this doesn't have any cost implications for the city and that the architectural drawings have been completed. But that's my main query, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Mpefu.
Chair, I'm covered. Thank you.
Thank you. You can proceed. Deva is now ahead.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chairperson. Okay, you can go ahead, witness.
Okay, members, the question that has been raised of the eviction process being dependent on the process to finalize the project, the contract, like it's not the case. Because the reason we are closing this contract is because of the eviction process. We know that the process is going to take a very long time in order to can achieve a court order to evict. So hence, we are closing the contract because the dependable factor here is the approval of the building plans. So the approval of the building plans is the one that is going to assist us in order to close this contract because we need to pay a final product and we need to have we need to have the milestones for the designs to be achieved, hence because we won't be able to go to the construction phase due to the eviction process that needs to unroll. So like the designs will be available, will be approved. Then as soon as the eviction process has been resolved, then we're going to undergo a new procurement process to go to the implementation phase. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up from my side, does that mean that there's a cancellation then on any of the construction part of the project, or was that not included in the scope? Thanks.
Thanks. You can
Thank you. Thank you, Member Varusha. What we are trying to do here, because as indicated by the project manager, we don't know when the eviction process is going to be concluded. And for us to just keep the contract with the department to an extent that it even goes into a section 1016 type of a contract is not ideal. So what we have agreed with the service provider is that we are going to let them finish the planning or the design phase. Once we have the architectural drawings approved, then we can close the contract with them and leave it at that, because they were appointed for even the construction phase of the project. Now you are asking what is it that is going to happen to the construction phase of the project. So Sosville is similar to Mamelodi hostels. We have an urban development framework that is approved by MECO, and we are pursuing from the department side that we look at the development of the hostels from that view, as opposed to us doing the small refurbishment works, which don't necessarily reduce the housing backlog as much as we want. So with Sourceville, we are going to be looking at it from that perspective. There's also appetite from other organs of states to partner with the city to develop it at a much higher level where we can have even different typologies. However, in the remaining 20 units that we were supposed to do with the service provider, we can still complete them because the structure is there. Really, the items that were outstanding are really minor items. Once we have achieved the eviction process, then we will be in a position to do the refurbishments and complete the project while we are looking at a much higher scope for the Sourceville hostels. Thanks.
Thanks, Verusha. You covered?
Yes, Chair, I'm covered. I just wanted to know if there was a requirement to include a cancellation in the, or of the construction part, or to record that in this process, or if that's just managed separately as part of the contract management of this. But thanks, Chair. That was my comments.
Thanks. Members can then adopt the recommendations for the extension of time for 3 months, as requested by the department. Portia, our next item, Portia, thank you.
Our next item, Chairperson, still from Human Settlement, reads HHS 01 2018/19 Thornt Review. Request for approval of revision of professional fees and approval of extension of time for Messrs. Libara Project Pty Ltd for development of design, supervision, and certification of works for the upgrading of 2.5 kilometer stormwater channel, 20 kilometer of roads and stormwater in Thornt Review. Chairperson, the item is tabled.
Thank you, Secretary, Chairperson, and members of the BAC. We had hoped that by the time this item serves, we'll have all the comments in place. If you look at the report, it does not have legal comments as yet. We are in the process of sourcing and finalizing them. So, Chairperson, we request that this item be referred to the next meeting until we have the signed comments from our legal department.
Item is withdrawn. Secretariat, please do not accept any items that don't have comments. Our next item.
Chairperson, that was the last one.
Thank you. Members, that was the last item for today. Meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chair.